Good morning, everybody. How's it going? All right. Go ahead and turn down that music in the back. Finally, we're in the middle of a project here in the auditorium, so everything's a little bit different. So thank you to the team in the back, and thanks for your patience. There's a lot out of order still. We got stuff to do to even get ready for tonight, it looks like. So I had to leave at 3:30 for an MC board meeting that ended at 11:30 last night. So, and then I see my daughter celebrating wins here. I'll kick it off. My daughter was team MVP for basketball. She got team MVP for volleyball, and now basketball. She's doing very well with athletics. So we're celebrating that for her. All right, so that was cool. I got to see that on video last night. I heard I didn't miss much besides that, she said. Thank you. All right, what can we celebrate? I've not been here the last 2 weeks in person, so talk to me.
What's good?
Hi, Karen Modesto and OC family. So we had our second welcome huddle on Sunday, and that just felt really good. We didn't have a ton of people, but the first we offered it after both services, and after the first service we had like 3 family units, but the tables were pretty full, and it felt good and right. So I really appreciated that, and let's see. Personal win, my son called me this morning, which is why I was a little behind schedule, but he got leave for Easter, and I kept like praying that. It was such a wild, like, could this even happen? But I kept thinking like, man, Lord, it'd be so great if he was home for Easter. Could you pull that off? Could he be home for Easter? And he flies in a couple days before Easter, and he'll be here for my granddaughter's birthday as well, and then he goes to San Diego. And he started classes, he's the class lead, and is already like getting good scores, and they appointed him the leader there because that seems to be what God is doing wherever he sends him. So we celebrate that. Yeah.
A note on the welcome huddle, not we celebrate the win of it all, but just a note for us that we kind of observed. I want to pass on while I'm thinking about it. When service goes long, welcome huddle isn't as effective. And so we had some in first service, but the second service went a little bit longer. And I think by that time, people are ready to leave. They're not even 10 minutes is not attractive.
I was gonna say after your win, second service would have had people if the preacher hadn't preached so long, which had been me. It had been me that.
And we kind of had this idea, like, because we were going to do baptisms on yesterday or 2 days ago, 3 days ago, and we decided not to because we felt like welcome huddle needed to have space and get people in there sooner. And so, but then we didn't deliver on the service flow. And so just a note for all of you campus pastors, I think that if you're doing welcome huddle right after service, your service needs to be on the shorter side. I thought you were talking about the win. I was like, yeah, I guess so.
Promoting an awkward movie. Other wins? You guys, let me help coach us for just a second. You should come to chapel ready with a win. If the Lord is doing something, let's celebrate it. Also, we celebrate wins. We got to remember what he's done. So don't be kind and wait for the next person next to you. You can just be selfish and take the mic.
I'll be selfish and take the mic. Last Sunday, I got to pray with a guy after service here at Modesto, and it was just like a great moment. You could see that God was working in him, and so I've been texting him all week, just back and forth, and he's telling me about some addiction stuff that he's been dealing with, and one of the things that happened was he said he had a moment where his car got stolen. And so he was without a car for a long time. And so he's been like getting an Uber to church back and forth. And so he's like, yeah, you could be praying for me to get a car. And so I said, yeah, sweet, man, I'll pray. And then he just told me yesterday that an old friend of his reached out to him on Instagram, said he had this feeling inside he was supposed to reach out to him, and reached out to him and gave him his like Ford Focus. And just gave him a car, which is really awesome. And he said the coolest thing was this was a man of God. That's what he said. And so, as somebody who's like new on their journey with God, or at least coming back to Jesus, like that's a huge moment for him. And so, I don't know, I just felt like that was a really cool story. It's cool to see God work powerfully like that in people's lives and answer prayers so directly. So I thought that was cool. Yeah.
You're all on camera.
Modesto Mike. Sunday, a young man was coming into the church wearing a shirt, kind of a sweatshirt kind of shirt that said on the front of it, iron. So I asked him, are you feeling like iron today? And he said, no, I'm not. So I gave me a doorway. So I asked him, well, what's going on? We talked for a little bit. He's a young man on leave now from the military. So I got to pray with him right there at the doorway coming into the atrium. So you never know what kind of answer you're going to get when you ask somebody how they're doing.
Kim from the Ripon campus. Man, we had a great Sunday. We had 4 new families that came, and that was awesome. And they were all filled out Connect Nards, another win. And they were all invited by someone in our church, which that was pretty awesome to see too. Also, we've got 28 people signed up for the missions trip so far. So love to see people on mission in that way. Also, man, I shared a couple weeks ago that we're starting a kind of a widows, like a care group that's going to help care for our widows, single ladies and different things. And we had our first meeting. Well, I wasn't there, but they had their first meeting, and there was 8 of them that have signed up, and they just are going to have their feelers out and care for the older generation in our church. Loved that. And then one more is that actually, I think it's in 2 weeks. It was supposed to be this Sunday, but it'll be next Sunday. We are opening our 4th little kids classroom. So altogether, 5 classrooms for kids. And Rochelle is helping kind of organize. And she said, wow, we have so many volunteers signed up right now. I can't even fill all the slots. There's so many. So I am praising the Lord that there's a new onslaught of volunteers to help in kids ministry. So praising the Lord for that.
Janelle from Ripon. We also had one track on Sunday, and we had 8 people join us. It was our first one of the year, and we ended up postponing it. It was supposed to be a couple weeks ago, but the people who were going to come just were sick, couldn't come. We couldn't get the tech figured out the morning of, and the day we were supposed to have it, we only had, I think, 4 people coming and had to postpone it, and this time we had 8. So it was just really cool to see that, it didn't happen how we thought it was going to happen, but we had more people join us.
Jordan Schlegel, One Church family. My win is that my wife still honors her former last name, Wagner, Brooke Wagner. We love the Wagner household, and we also love Brooke Schlegel.
Wow.
I can't see that far.
For those of you that can't see the screen, it says Brooke Wagner, which is, in my opinion, very highly disrespectful towards her husband. So, oh gosh, assistant superintendent. No, yeah, Dr. Jay Herndon. So if you don't know, he was a pastor at a church in Burlingame once upon a time, actually Kim's home church. And so he knows the Hernandez family for years and years and years, and they've all gone to, they've just known each other for years. Was Kim's pastor all growing up. And so we were at this giant sectional meeting or something like that, and we'd just gotten married, and I'm particular about the last name. And in front of everybody, he says, "Brother Hernandez, can you please go?" Which is Kim's maiden name, which
erupted the crowd of
Yeah.
laughter.
With folks like these that now it lives with me for all of eternity. So that's a wonderful thing for me. Yeah, Brother Hernandez. Look, Brooke changed her name to Capital Schlegel. For those of you that can't see, it's on there. All caps, Schlegel. In respect. Yeah, he's in trouble. Sorry, we love you, Brooke.
He said, I still want dinner tonight.
Cookie. A win for Ripon. I'm Dave from Ripon Dave. And we had, like Kim said, we had 4 new families showing up. And one of them, I met him at the end. He's from Manteca, just moved to Manteca, I believe. And so Rochelle kind of brought him over and was introducing him to me. And so I started talking to him and said, well, he wasn't going to fill out a Connect card. And we were talking. By the time, no, we don't force people. You try to force people to fill out Connect cards, and people hate that. He chose to fill out a Connect card on his own. There was no guns or it wasn't like a timeshare. Anyways. At the end of it, he says, I really like this church. I said, well, let me walk you through. He's got 3 young kids. He's a homeschooler, and he was there scouting for his family. He didn't bring his wife or his kids. And he said, I'm shopping around. We're new to the area. I'm shopping around. And Rochelle, I said, let me show you the kids space area, because that's the thing that we value kids, and so let me just show you the security aspects of it and, our classrooms and stuff. He's like, no, Rochelle already showed me, which was awesome that Rochelle had already taken the time to show him all that stuff. And by the end of it, he says, yeah, I really like what you guys got going on here. I'm going to bring my family next week. Can I fill out one of those? So he was asking, he wasn't being told to fill out a Connect card. And so he filled out the Connect card. And then this is the win. If he happens to stick around, he's the unicorn. He said, well, I normally serve in worship, and my wife normally serves in kids ministries. And I was like I was taken back. I was like, I short circuited. I don't know what to do with this information. So it was pretty awesome. If this guy shows up and he's a part of the youth, he's a texter now too. Awesome. So we're cruising.
That's so good. What else? Any other one? I guess I could walk around.
Savannah, OC family in Modesto, we had a One Kids Panda Express fundraiser on Sunday. It was a lot of fun. Did pretty well there. It was a really neat fundraiser because we didn't have to do very much, just the promo on our end. And then all the church people that were there, that when I was there for my hour, said, let's do this every week. So they had a fun time with the community as well as giving back to Kids Camp. And then on Sunday, I got really exciting news. A family had been attending our church for maybe 2 years. I had prayed for them to kind of get into kids, and they got swept up into the security team instead. But then they've been sticking their feet back into kids ministry just recently. And the husband said, okay, I'm ready to be in every week at preteens as a leader and a teacher. So that was really, really exciting to sow the seed of prayer and then see it come back in a strong way. So that's exciting.
All right, Lord, thank you for all this that we get to celebrate and all you're doing. And we pray, we ask for more things to celebrate, more people coming to know you, more people finding a place to connect and grow and make a difference. And so help us with that in this great season in which we're celebrating what you did for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, everybody. Are we feeling alive and well? Good. Oh, perfect. That works. Excited today. We started last year talking through all of our team culture values, and then we took a pause from that as we felt like the Lord gave us the directive to really spend some time in focused prayer during chapel. So then we kind of wrapped all of last year up, for the most part, in prayer on Tuesday mornings during chapel. Well, I'm going to go back to some of the team culture values we haven't caught yet. So, or we didn't, not that we didn't catch it, but that we didn't teach last year. So it's going to feel random that I'm starting in the middle, what might feel like the middle of a team, of the list of our team culture values, but it's really just a continuation from last year. Okay, so today we're going to talk about family. Team culture value number, let me give you the right number. Team culture value number 11, family. We value family and working hard. Let me take one step back. Sometimes we say we're something that we're believing we're going to become. And sometimes I think we say we're something that we're actually living out. That's kind of the difference between culture, right? Whether it is culture or whether it isn't culture, is like, are we actually living this out? There's an old leadership, I don't know that axiom is the right word, but tell me if I'm wrong. An old leadership saying that culture eats vision, for breakfast. Thank you. I was going to say every day of the week, but see, it doesn't work. Also, Jordan's laughing at me because I always mess up those things. I'm like, that saying? And I say it wrong, and Jordan's always like, that's it, Marcia. So culture eats vision for lunch. We can have a vision to reach our world, but if who we are and how we do things and the environment and the values and all of what we bring to the table doesn't aid in that, we're going to be working, uphill. And so that's just kind of bringing us into this whole truth about who we are as a team. So these team culture values, this is who we are. This is who we want to be. This is who you get to choose to be. I had somebody recently talk to me about a concern, not about any certain campus, but in general about the church. They were like, I have watched so many team members move on. You've got the Arujos with little kids and the Crenshaws with little kids. And, just over the last however many chunks of years, people moving on. And they said, I started to ask, is one church a place that you can serve God and you can raise a family? Because that would be a concern of theirs. And I think it's a good question that any parent should be asking, because obviously if you're responsible for your kids, that's our number one priority. And I think that today, I've got some notes, but then I just kind of want to share a little bit from my heart, and then I hope to open it up for some discussion. So I won't talk too long. I think today what I want to encourage us with is to take a look at who we say we are, who we say we want to be, and then ask the question how you're living in that. So I'm going to start with who we are, who we say we are. Well, we value family and working hard. That's who we are as a team. So if you're on this team, we value family and we value working hard. I'm not a PK. Both of my parents worked not in the church. My mom is an executive at an international air freight. They do logistics. Don't ask me what that means, but she does something really important. My dad, growing up, was a high-rise window cleaner, and then he changed professions. He went back to school and became a building engineer. So I don't know what it's like to live in a ministry house, but I know this: they valued their family, and they had to work hard because they had to put food on the table. And so, it's just part of what we do as adults. And there is a unique gift that I think one church has decided to lean into, that as a team, we're going to make space for both of those things. We're not just going to say, hey, this is your job, do it. And hey, you have a family, so take care of your family. We're going to say, how do we do this in a way that we actually make space, do some practical things that will help you value your family, honor your spouse. If you are still raising kids, value the kids or your grandkids you have. How do we do both? I think we have a profession and a ministry that we get to emphasize both. We get to do both really, really well. We've said this before in this room, but there was a generation that before us that sacrifice their family at the altar of ministry. You know, we have a generation of pastors' kids that said, I never saw my parents. It would be Christmas morning and they'd get a phone call and they'd leave. They, you know, they didn't make any of my t-ball games or my basketball games or whatever. Like, my family sacrificed 100% of the time because most often in that generation, my dad was a pastor, right? Which I don't think that's right. I think our first ministry is our family. But I think in response, then we had a generation that swung the opposite direction, that had an unrealistic expectation of that they needed to protect their kids from the ministry. They needed to protect their kids from the church. And I liken it to this illustration that Kyle, as the dad and as the father, that'd be the same thing, as the husband and as the male in our household, I would never protect my kids from him. I just wouldn't. I don't need to protect my kids from Kyle. I would hate if Kyle felt like he needed to protect the kids from me. That would not be a healthy place. And there was a generation where we felt like we have to protect our kids from the church because the church is, you know, we were hurt by the church. So now we're not going to do that to our kids. And I love the fact that I actually think we're now in a generation, not just at one church, but I actually think our generation of ministers right now is realizing, no, I actually think that our kids have a gift being raised in the church. I often ask myself this question. We have this conversation a lot. How do we help our kids fall in love with Jesus and his bride? How do I help Jackson and Riley and Colby, who are all three so different, fall in love with the Lord and his church? There will be a day that they don't live with me anymore, that they don't have to listen to me anymore. I really hope they choose to, but you know, like they will be all on their own. And I hope they don't abandon the family, the body of Christ. We believe this because we preach this and we live this. We aren't meant to do this alone. And so I think that for those of us who are still intricately engaged in the life of our kids, who are married, maybe your spouse doesn't work in the church, so there's some unique dynamics there, or who are engaged with their grandkids or their nieces or nephews or whatever, I think that it is our honor to create an environment in who we are in our houses and then who we are in our home, in our church, that makes space for them and makes it easy for them to fall in love with Jesus. We decided before we had kids, we were going to minister as a family, which meant I had Colby and 2 weeks later I was at summer camp, which was dumb. But Kyle was really nice and it was like 1,000 degrees and he's like, you should stay on the houseboat in the air conditioning. So, you know, we like made it work out, but it was, at the time, I actually wanted to be there. Now I look back and I'm like, that was really crazy that I decided to do such a thing. But here was the truth of it. I had remembered hearing Josh McDowell, who was like, you know, the youth pastor of all youth pastors, saying if he could go back and change anything about his ministry, he would choose to live his family in front of his students, his family life in front of his students. Because what is most broken in our society right now? It's the household. So we've got teenagers, if I'm just talking about teens, or we've got kids, or we have adults who have no idea what God's concept of what family should be, of what marriage should be, of what fatherhood and motherhood and healthy home relationships. And so if I'm going to live my life anyway as a minister, I don't get to be a youth pastor anymore. But when I was a youth pastor, I really thought my teenagers, I don't have a house life and then a work life and then a ministry life. I have a life. And all these things need to be integrated. Now that doesn't mean obviously that it's all the same everywhere. I have conversations with my husband I will never have with my teenagers at church, but it does mean that I get to do that thing real well. So we decided early on we were going to do ministry as a family, and I think it was really easy with one. Colby he just did what, you know, it was like, this is great. And then I had Riley, and I was like, Well, Riley's a real stinker. She's not interested in joining the family. She's interested in running the family. At like 2 months, that girl was like, you know, who runs the world? Me. That's how she's wired. So it was harder, and I had to decide, am I gonna do what's easy, or am I gonna do what in the end I actually want to create for my family? So we had to like shift to try to do what I felt like was right, big picture for us, not what was easy in the moment. Now, don't get me wrong. What was right sometimes was we divided and conquered. We shifted things around because we value family. I couldn't act like I didn't have kids. I now have 2 kids. Now we weren't a couple with a kid. We were a family. Man, 3 to 4 was a game changer. But so I say all this to encourage you, maybe just with a practical step. Decide today, you know, what do I want my kids' life to look like 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? When they graduate, what do I want from them? What do I want for them? There are things today, you know, you're on the path to where you want to end up. And if I'm not careful, I can live with today in mind, but not with tomorrow. And Kyle's really good with tomorrow in mind. And then we got to work on how to make that practical for today. So you need that teamwork. So I tell myself this often, that my kids are living in a greenhouse, not a glass house. I do not have to, they are not the kids, not every person in the church gets to discipline my kids. They are not their parents. Not every person in the church gets to correct my kids. They are not their parents. Now, their teacher gets to correct them when they misbehave. And their pastor gets to, you know, correct them when they need to be pastored. But that is a boundary that I get to put up for my kids, because any other random kid isn't getting parented or, you know, by every usher, greeter, whoever, you know. But sometimes the pastor, historically, it could be like, well, that pastor's kid should behave this certain way. No, my kid should behave like a kid who's trying to learn to love Jesus. And so I choose to create a world in my home and in my church, in our church, where I don't have to worry that they live in a glass house. They're not unsafe here. They can totally fail here, and they can totally succeed here. I want to honor and celebrate them the same way I would honor and celebrate the random person's child over there. And I want to honor and protect them the same way I'd honor and protect anybody else's. And I think that living in a house of with ministers, of which all of you are, as you raise kids, as you're raising kids, there is just an environment that they will soak things up because God placed them in your house. And so it never surprises me when PKs end up being on mission for the Lord, whether it be in the marketplace or in ministry. That's how it should be. They should have, you know, they are in a greenhouse to be able to have all the extra nutrients that not everybody gets. One of the things that I would encourage us to do with your kids is to highlight the benefits, not just the sacrifices of ministry. Highlight the benefits, not just the sacrifices. My niece is 6 or 7. I should know that. We carpool to school. This is Marlo's oldest daughter. And she was saying she was invited to a birthday party on a Sunday, and she was really sad she couldn't go because her mommy works on Sundays. And I felt that like deep. This 7-year-old little girl or 6-year-old girl doesn't get why she doesn't get to do what all her friends do. So I was listening to her, and we were chit-chatting, and I said, you know, Addie, I know what that's like, but do you know how awesome it is that you get to be a kid of a pastor? And she's like, no. No, I just know I don't get to go to this birthday party. So I started to talk to her about, I'm like, how many teenagers do you get to hang out with that know you? She's like, oh. And then she says all the teenagers that she thinks are her best friends. How many times, did you get to go to summer camp? Yeah, and I got to go to that thing in that youth convention thing. I'm like, yes, you did. Was that fun? That was awesome. So then I'm starting to try to tell her, these are all the benefits of what it looks like to be in a pastor's kid. Your mommy is a pastor, and look what you get. But sometimes all we feel is what we sacrifice. And so I would just say, highlight the benefits and the sacrifices of ministry. My kids miss a lot of school. they're not sad about it. For the benefits of ministry. You know, they get to do some things that not every other kid gets to do because we've decided to do ministry a certain way. And on the flip side, let me just affirm something we believe and we live. Do not delegate what is uniquely yours. Your marriage, your kids, your family, for something that anybody else can do. Anybody else could pastor this church. Anybody else could lead your department. Anybody else can do that. Nobody else can be the spouse to your spouse or the parent to your child. That is uniquely yours. And so as you work and as you are a family, man or woman, boy, do both with your whole heart and with your whole soul. I want to tell you a few things that are values of mine and Kyle that we want to give to you as somebody who's, if you've got kids still in your household. I want to tell you that it is a priority of ours to have great ministry for your kids. If you wouldn't send your kids to kids' church, we have a problem. If you wouldn't send your kids to youth camp, we have a problem. One of the things that we often say is, if I wouldn't attend this church, I've got to fix this church. Now, I get we all have our own, listen, I really want to go to a black church because I like a little bit of soul. Give me some soul in my worship. Give me I'm ready to get up and dance in the altar just a little bit as somebody's preaching. Like, give me some organ. I am in for it. Now, I realize I married the whitest man possible. So guess what? I'm not going to have that. So we all sacrifice a little bit. But if I didn't pastor this place, is this where I'd want my kids to come and learn about Jesus? Are these the relationships I'd want to create for them? That's the question that we should be asking. So we want to have great ministry for your kids. We want it to be safe, clean, fun, and we want them to fall in love with Jesus there. So that's a priority for us. And we want to have a schedule that honors your family. One of the changes, this does not apply to all of us because we're not all full-time here. But for those who are fully responsible for in terms of a career, when you're solely our responsibility, we've decided that our office hours here are going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 to 2:30. Why? Or 9 to 2:30. Why? Because we realize that ministry means you're probably going to have a worship night midweek. You'll probably have a group that you lead. You'll likely have a dinner that you're going to have at your house. And we want to make it possible for you to be at drop-offs and pickups for your kids so that when you go to prayer on a Wednesday night, it's not that you haven't seen them all day long and you're not sacrificing on both ends of the spectrum. And so those are things that we want you to know. This is how we do it. Kyle often reminds me of this because I can go from great to overwhelmed in a split second. And here's the thing that he helps me recognize at times. And I made this statement Sunday morning when I was preaching. I'm really good at relaxing. I'm not always good at resting. And I would say to be a healthy person who honors family and working hard, I actually think that rest over relaxation is something that is really key to being able to be healthy in both spaces. Okay. All right. Those are my thoughts. I'd love some questions, comments, feedback. I don't know if, Kyle, you want to come up and add any thoughts before we open it to everybody?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you describe the difference between relaxing and resting?
Anybody want to give a shot at that? I feel like I've just been talking a lot.
I would say for me, relaxing would be more of a sit down and watch a show and just kind of, unplug my brain. Resting would be like spending time with the Lord and purposefully seeking the Lord while not doing a lot of other things or any other things.
Any other thoughts on resting versus relaxing?
Yeah, I think relaxing is like a bodily action, But sometimes you could be resting your body and not resting your mind and your heart. And so I really think at the core of rest is trust. It's just like, do I trust that the Lord is working when I'm not? Do I trust that the Lord is handling my stuff while I'm here sitting on the couch? And so I think the two have to go hand in hand. You've got to lay on the couch, but you've also got to remember and like actively remember, like, man, God's in control. I don't need to pick this up. I don't need to get everything done today. I can just put it aside. And while I stop working, God is still working. So.
Any other random thoughts on that? Listen, Jesus napped. Karen asks, does it involve naps? For those of you who listen, Jesus napped and I want to be just like him. So I say yes. Yes. Do you have any thoughts that you'd add to that, resting versus relaxing?
More of just what he said as far as when it comes to the mind, because that's my hardest thing, is I can be watching the new Halo show, yet I miss part of it because I'm thinking about the message I'm working on or something I've got to do in the next couple days. So it's about being able to totally, for me, totally unplug my brain versus just my body's not doing anything.
I don't know the difference of the words, but just practically for me, I can break away from work, but not feel at rest because now I'm picking up daily habit, household chores, planning a party, da-da-da-da. So I don't know the words, but say I'm resting from work, which I think is biblical, right? But then I'm not per se resting from all things. So I'm intentional about resting from work. I'm not always intentional about resting from doing. Does that make sense?
And that's where the biblical Sabbath, which, we've certainly in Protestant culture, just not Jewish culture, I guess is the best way to say it, not Jewish. We've changed a one-day Sabbath to a 2-day weekend or a 5-day work week. We've really kind of on some level tweaked it. We've Americanized it. A lot of the world works 6 or 7 days a week to provide for their family. We've somehow created a culture in this place, the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in this world, of a normalcy of 5 days a week of work. And we even have a generation, to your point, that now expects to work 4 or 3 days a week and have enough money to provide for their family. Anyway, long story short. But I think that as I think about the biblical Sabbath, like that's why it went beyond just the trade that they had to, and they've accentrified it now, right? And, in Israel today, you can't, if you're a Jew, you have a Shabbat elevator that stops at every floor because it's considered work to push that button. And so that, I'm not saying, but like the concept really is that Sabbath is not just your trade, but it is also the activity. And so what we teach as we study the Bible is that 6 days a week, I honor the Lord through work and activity. 1 day a week, I honor the Lord with rest and less activity. That's as we read God's word, that is the true definition of a Sabbath. And so again, in those 6 days a week of work and activity, that is a blend of your job, whatever that trade is. It's a blend of shopping and grocery shopping and yard work and things like that. And I'm not saying that some of that stuff isn't life-giving for some, but it is activity. And then 1 day a week, we're just trying to slow all that down. And it doesn't mean that we still don't go to the kids' game over here or something like that where there's a hustle and bustle of it all, but we're just trying to strip it down and get it to a little bit slower pace. 6 days a week, we honor the Lord through work and more activity. 1 day a week, we honor the Lord through rest and less activity. And that's, I hope you can see even the margin in those words. We don't say no activity on that 1 day a week, it's just less activity. I think that is a beautiful definition that really honors balance and still says the horse is in the ditch, get the horse out. That's a Bible thing.
Would you consider that also, or would you say that also with that would also be a refreshing, like a hobby that you really enjoy versus just stopping, but something that actually fills you up as well?
For sure. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, disagreements about family, working hard? Yeah, Pastor Kim.
Just from experience, I did not. Whose child is that? They are not resting. Ah. I did not grow up in a pastor's home either. But my parents were very involved in the church. My mom was the women's ministry director. My dad was a deacon and, helped clean the church, just volunteered. And it was very life-giving to them. And it was during the day and age when it was Sunday morning service and Sunday evening. And then Wednesday nights was missionettes and Royal Rangers, and then prayer meetings and Sunday school first and then church. But I grew up loving the church. I was at the church every time those doors were open. And my dad just celebrated his 80th birthday. My mom is 77. And they are the connections director at their church. They love the church. They know the people of the church. My mom is bringing meals to people in the hospital or hospice or what, I grew up loving the church. And I think there was a couple things though. When looking back, like, what was it? Why do people have this negative kids that grew up like, I have to be at church? But there was a culture that it wasn't stuffy. As a kid, there was other kids there, and we had a play space and I could run around, and I never felt like someone overly corrected me. I felt I could be myself. And I wasn't the normal kid. I mean, I was kind of a tomboy, and I was, kicked off my Mary Janes, and I was playing in the sanctuary or whatever. Probably not the sanctuary. You couldn't play in the sanctuary, but in the fireside room. But I just grew up, I just wanted to share my experience. I loved the church, and I was there a lot. And there were other kids there a lot, and had a lot of Sunday school teachers and I don't know. So yay, God, I don't know. I just felt like there is a win to it. So my kids, and as I'm pastoring, we do our best to create that same culture. Staff meetings are at night, and so we got kids running around, and we provide snacks, and so just I don't know, trying to create that same culture so that our kids all love being in the house of God.
I have recently experienced somebody trying to correct my children that had no business or healthy approach to correcting my children. And I guess I felt like one of my responsibilities to my kids was to say, okay, they misstepped. These people, this person misstepped, and they shouldn't have done what they did. But as people who love the Lord and love other people, not even just pastors of the church, I said we still need to extend grace. And so I tried to help the moment, take the sharpness out of the moment, and try to separate it from church to us as believers and how we're supposed to act. And so we're kind of walking through that with grace, but also like I do have to, I can't just allow things to barrage my children. I have to step in front of that because that's my role on some level. And so there's that balance of things. I think one of the issues with a true Sabbath rest, God, and this is such a biblical concept that Jesus reinforced, so it's beyond just the Jewish culture, But I think one of the great offenses is our American culture, the culture in which we live life, going all the way back to the assembly line, Henry Ford's assembly line. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. But we stopped being tradesmen and learning a skill and taking our life's effort to focus on doing one thing well, and started doing a billion things. because we can assembly line our lives. And all of a sudden we live in a culture in a day and age, we feel the pressure of like, okay, I need to do 100 things well today. And then tomorrow I need to do an additional 100 things well tomorrow. Instead of just kind of focusing like we live at a feverish pitch of life. And no matter if you could set, that will overrun your Sabbath boundary every single time. And so there's an important aspect that we have to realize that's our own self-inflicted, whether it's a church, being at the church too much, or like one thing, Oli and Rochelle do this well. Rochelle and Janelle really run this giant thing we call Light Up the Night. And Oli and Rochelle are wrapped up in the whole thing and planning it for months out, and the actual event of super busy, and they just stop whatever they're doing, grab their kids and walk through the thing and take time to be a part of the festivities. That's fun for their children, to engage in that. And so I appreciate that they just stop working for a minute and be a part of that. Like that's the goal. Yeah, and so their kids get to experience the fun of it, and so they don't lose out as parents as these fun memories. It's just not all like cracking the whip at this feverish pitch because we got to get this event done, and then Sunday morning's coming, and so we got to get to that thing. And I just think on some level you have to have the maturity to be able to say, okay, enough is enough. It's God's church. If I stop doing 100 things and focus on one or two right things, that will still honor God, and he's going to bring in the people to help you to do whatever it is that he needs done at the church in the first place. And so I think that a lot of us need to get better at just evaluating the assembly line life process. If you work at a church, that can be a big part of it, but also like we run ourselves into birthday parties and then the next thing and then this and that, and those things are good, but they're not mandatory and don't get put on the altar above God's word and rest and Sabbath and health in our families and stuff. And so pay attention, folks. We're all at our own steering wheels, and we're all going to be accountable for it someday.
Well, whoever wants to share next, something one of you said made me think about this. Kyle and I, a handful of years back, realized something. One of our kids said something, and we realized, whoa, they are confusing our church life versus our work life. So we decided to become very clear when we're doing work because it's our job versus when this is what we do because we go to church. So because otherwise my kids, they are not able to see the difference between my mom and dad have a job. Now I believe it's a calling, but very practically, they have a job that they do because this is how God has created us to work and provide for our families. And they were blaming the church for something that was a work problem. So we started being very clear about no, Sundays is church day. Wednesday nights are church. If we go to an event, no, we're going to church. Now what we do during the week, that's work. When I pull out my computer and we're watching a show, that's mommy working. That's not a church problem, that's mom's work problem. And it's probably mom's problem. And so we had to be very thoughtful about our language there. And I would just say, had we not caught it, we might not have realized how internally in ourselves we were blaming the church for something that was really a personal boundary issue.
You use the word greenhouse. My kids are living in a greenhouse, not a glass house. I love this expression because a greenhouse, obviously, it's growing good things inside. A glass house, I think it comes from just this thought that everybody's watching. It's like life in the fishbowl. But I think in a greenhouse, the very thing that the environment is sending to grow the plants or whatever is in the greenhouse could be the very thing that we were like, oh, protect them from a sunburn. And so we've got to be really cautious that the very thing that the Lord sends to grow our children is not the thing that we shield our children from. And again, you can break down any illustration. Well, too much of a good thing is too much, right? We get that. But the point I'm trying to make is there is something that the Lord wants to do through the good days and the bad days. And we are living in a generation where helicopter parents have become I heard lawnmower parents. It's so much lower to the ground, so much like I got to protect my kids from every single thing. I've got to schedule their life out just perfectly, when they eat, when they sleep, who holds them, who doesn't hold them, just all that stuff. And I just want to free you with something. Do what you feel the Lord compelling you to do, but remember, think about your own life. The things that form you and have formed you are both good and bad. We argue about this because, every person would love to have the perfect Hollywood love story or whatever. But one time I made the mistake of telling Marcia that if my parents hadn't gotten a divorce, we would have never met. And of course, thus it could be said that this life that I have, you included in it, is plan B. Okay.
Truthful statement about divorce not being God's plan. So could we have never met? I just say the sovereignty of the Lord. But anyways, poor choice of words.
She did say that, the Lord could have, Star Trekked you from Texas to California, and all of a sudden, yeah, she did say that. Okay, let's not get lost here. But the point is this: a horrible situation happened with my family. My mom was very unhappy. In her unhappiness, she moved us to Mexico for a year because my dad was traveling. I got horribly depressed, got sick the entire year, was away from my dad, miserable, depressed. While down there to end the marriage, she decided to be unfaithful because she knew that was at this point the only way my dad wouldn't take her back. And even then, he took her back. And so she just had to say, finally, I'm done. She could not figure this thing out. I come back on my 8th grade graduation. My mom says goodbye in the morning, leaves for Mexico to where she would live for the next 3 years. My grandma was there, her mom, when I arrived home from school that day, graduated 8th grade. My church adopted me in that season. The youth leaders, the youth pastors became as much family as anybody else. Bottom line, I could go eventually my dad, because they divorced, gets a job out in California instead of Texas. I move out here to spend time with him. I just go down the list of things. All of that stuff in the moment, super painful. And any God-loving parent would have wanted to protect me from that, shield me from all that stuff. Again, this is big picture stuff, but it's magnified by a generation of parents that sit right over here usually that don't want to take their kid to kids ministry because they're worried about what that means for their kid, or don't want to serve at the church for serve one, sit one, because they know that their kid can't do 2 times in kids ministry, 2 services. I'm the living proof of an entire 17 years of kids being in 2 services. They survive. They will find food someplace. They will forage, in rooms here or there to find something. And the bottom line is, but back to this whole thing, anybody that loved Kyle and Todd Bethke would have said, shield these poor children from this horrible life. And it was hard at times. Living with my grandparents and my dad making a life traveling, building golf courses, and my mom in Mexico and Zacatecas or wherever else she lived in that time, was hard at times. But I would not be who I am today. I probably would not have the family that I have today if not for these details. And so look at your life. I know your story, Dave. Yucca Valley. I drive through there and then I drive out of there. It's that fast, right? We joke about your life down there, but we would not be who 7 brothers, 6 other brothers? There's 6 total. Just managing that life with family or whatever, you would not be the leader that you are without every one of those difficult moments. You would not be the leader of your brothers that you are without those difficult days. And so it's just really one of those things that I want to encourage you all that you can't break or mess up the will of God. And sin, he's created a world in which even sin and struggle doesn't shut down the good. We wouldn't know each other, I don't think, if all that hard stuff hadn't happened in my life. And so, I just say all that to say, you can't mess it up. You do your best. Obviously, I was You've heard me say this. I want to protect my kids against death and facial disfigurement. But like beyond that, everything's on the table. Like a broken elbow, and they've had them, is life transforming. And even facial disfigurement. If you look at Jackson, we did not succeed there. He's got a gash right here, but he survived. Okay, so I just say all that to say, just learn, do your best in the moment, make good decisions, but like the paranoia, like we don't have to do that. And also, we don't have to propagate that in those we lead. They're watching. They're watching how we do this thing called marriage and family. They're watching how, what value, and like they're gonna take our standard to the next degree. If they see us this level of eccentric, they're more than likely going to try to copy it and then some. And I really do believe we have a generation of parents at our campuses, in our church, that are watching, and they're paying attention out here, and they're paying attention here, and they are making their family decisions not based on the Spirit of God's leadership, but on the pressures and the expectations and the obviousnesses of the world in which we live. And I don't know that that's healthy. So,
Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, that was beautiful, especially all the facial disfigurement stuff. That's great advice. Thank you, Kyle. That was very entertaining. Yeah, no, I think everything's being said is really good. I think too, I look back at, and some of this stuff is stuff that I really struggle with. I think in, the final months of last year, I was really struggling, like coming home and just feeling like I wasn't, good enough dad, didn't have enough time with my kids. And I think a lot of it was just the sense of like, I come home and I can't put it away. I just can't put work away. And I think oftentimes, especially in ministry, when you feel like you're carrying a job that's too big for you, which I think every job in ministry is, but I also think there are certain moments in ministry, certain times in ministry where you're just like, I don't have enough. And everything becomes, I don't have enough. I don't have enough volunteers. I don't have enough time. When I was preaching every week, it was like I didn't have enough people on my preaching rotation. So I got to preach every Sunday, but I don't have enough material to sustain that. So how do I have enough time? I don't have enough time. And so everything becomes about all of the things that you don't have. And that becomes kind of a habit, a thought habit, a mind habit, right? And you get into this way of living that is all based around deficit. You're living out of deficit. I don't have enough time. And, I just think when you're in that place, I think back to the story of Jesus when it said the crowds came, but Jesus withdrew. Jesus was with crowds, but then he withdrew to lonely places. Every time he was facing that current that tried to draw him into something that would form him in the wrong way, Jesus responded by creating a countercurrent. He's like, I withdraw, I'm not going to be with the crowds. I'm going to be in a place where I'm alone with my Father. And I just think that those countercurrents in life that form us in the right way are so vital, are so important. And I just think in ministry, like just the natural current of ministry is like, we talk about the gospel. The gospel is already, but not yet. And I think so much of ministry is lived on the frontier of the kingdom that is not yet. Like we don't have enough volunteers. We need more, we need people to come into the kingdom. It's all about the mission. But I think really like firmly rooting ourselves in the gospel that is already in what we have, the abundance that we have in Jesus, and our own quiet time and our personal time is just, it's so important. And I think it has more life implications. It has implications on our family, because I just think if we're always living in a deficit, we're going to go and we're going to find that time elsewhere. We're going to find that mental space elsewhere, and we're going to end up withdrawing that from our family rather than, from our work time and all that. So anyways.
That's really great. Melinda, and then I'm going to close with a thought and prayer over all of you wonderful people.
I was listening to Caleb yesterday, and they talked about such an important thing, that how we talk about our phones and our kids being on phones. But they did a big survey and asked preteens and teens what was something they would like to change about their family in growing up. And they said they would love it if their parents were off their phones more. Not the kids, but the parents. Several times the kids had wanted to go maybe talk to their parents, and they were busy. They were busy on their computer or on their phone, and the kids said they really needed them. And so we're always talking about getting off the video games, getting off of this, but the kids are saying, I need my parents, and let's try to limit our time when we're with them.
That's a great reminder. I want to close with this thought, and then I'm going to pray for you guys. Somebody used an illustration once upon a time. I wish I could give them credit, but I don't remember who it was. But they said somebody had a favorite restaurant. They went to this favorite restaurant like 3 times a week. It was just from the moment they showed up through the moment they left, everything about it was just so good. They loved the front of house. They thought they had great service. The food was unbelievable. When they'd go, they knew their name. It was just the experience at this restaurant was just top notch. And so they loved it so much, when they needed work, they put a resume in to work there. And when they worked there, then they got to see the back of house. And all of a sudden, the experience was very different. Because now they were bussing tables and serving, and their experience was no longer front of house customer, but back of house worker. And the image, the story there, the lesson there was, for those of us in ministry, there was probably a piece of why we said yes to the team we're on, or the church we're at, or the job we have, because we loved the church. I never had a moment where God said, go be a pastor. I just remember thinking, if I have to spend my time doing a job, I really like the church, so I might as well work there. My front of house experience for the church was top notch. If I was going to do something, I wanted to do it there. And I would encourage, so that might be something that just speaks to you in your heart of like, okay, that encourages me about how I feel today in my world. But I would only encourage you that my kids, I want them to see 75 to 85% of their life of front of house. They do get to come and do work days and clean up or hang out here while we're working, but this is not their job. Their image and their window into the church should not be back of house work. And so what that means is the things that we go, I get to go to work today. My kids are going, I get to go to my favorite place today. I remember when we didn't do trunk or treat for the first time a couple years back, you would have thought I destroyed my children's lives. This is their tradition. And they did not have a choice to do something else because we were not providing it anymore. And it was like genuinely mourning for them. And on the back of house, everybody else was like, woohoo, we don't have to put on a big event. But my kids' perspective of this big event is like, this is what we do. This is how my childhood looks. I would only submit to you, now I'm not saying we made a good decision or a bad decision about trunk or treat back then or not trunk or treat today. This is the way of church. We grow and change. But I would only say to you who have spouses who are not part of the church, I mean, by part of the church, I hope your spouse is a part of the church. I mean, who don't have spouses that work at the church. Or you're raising families, kids, grandkids in your house that are not working at the church. You need to know the difference of church versus work. And I think it's my responsibility as a mom to let my kids be in a greenhouse. I'm not protecting them from anything, but I'm letting them live in the front of the house when I'm doing the work in the back of the house. Now, my kids are asking to make videos for us on social media, and they want to come and do things. So they're getting their fingers in ministry, but for them, that's front of house stuff. You know, that's front of the house stuff. So we value family and working hard. And I have to value it for myself and for my family and as a mom and as an employee. And then I get to do it, you know, we get to do it for one another. So, Lord, I just want to say thank you for this awesome team. Lord, you call us. You call us for seasons. You call us for a lifetime. First and foremost, to follow you. And then at times we get to put our hand to the plow in the work of a church, in the ministry. And I just pray that One Church would be a place that as individuals, we own working hard and building a family that is the very best we can do. It is not my boss's responsibility. It's not my ministry leader's responsibility. It's not even my spouse's responsibility. Lord, I have to do my part. And I pray that we would be right in line with you. And then I pray that our kids, our grandkids, our spouses would fall in love with you in the church. God, we are praying that in the closest spaces, the thing that we want to see in our congregation would be true. And so we pray for conviction, we pray for clarity, we pray for encouragement, and we just ask that you would help us to lead the way by living the way. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, y'all.
By the way, plan B is way better than plan A. I mean, whatever that is.
Y'all, we fought. We've been married 21 years. It had to have been like 3 years into our marriage. And I was like, did you just say I was plan B? So there is a plan A out there. He's like, well, I mean, that is not.
I didn't say you were plan B. I said California and.
Well, this woman then heard you are plan B. Anyways, all that to say, forgiveness runs deep in our household.
I was young and immature. All right. Have a good day.